There are a lot of missing pieces in our understanding of Deltarune's story. Like, what's your deal? And what's your deal? Where's Gaster? Is he here? Or here? Where's Des? Is she here? Where's Papyrus? Is he here? But there's also an often overlooked piece missing from Deltarune. One everyone seems to just breeze over. It doesn't look very significant after all, but looks can be deceiving. The truth is, this overlooked detail is the smoking gun that proves the knight isn't who you think it is. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So, back to the subject of Deltarune mysteries. The knight is hiding their identity, and Des is missing. Hey, if Des is the knight, we're solving 2 deer with 1 truck, am I right? Well, no. It kinda fits, but like, there's a whole conspiracy situation going on that surely started with her disappearance, right? And we kinda do know that Des is gone from the game since she's in the game's code, specifically talking about how she hasn't been able to leave. So then you have to say like, oh well maybe part of her came back as a ghost or Darkner or something. But I think that's a stretch, especially due to all the hints that the knight is someone from the light world. I cannot see Toby making the decision to specifically include a large closet for the perpetrator to hide in, and then doing it again and making it even more suspicious, only for it to turn out to just be a total fake-out. Plus, being involved in a conspiracy means we can rule out the knight being some kind of mindless, vengeful spirit. Now, it is to be expected that Toby Fox will introduce more rules on how this world works in later chapters, and so maybe we're not really supposed to make it all fit together now. It's like we're doing a jigsaw puzzle with only half the pieces. We're gonna have to accept that not every piece will connect to our larger understanding. However, I am here to tell you, the true identity of the Roaring Knight is not one of those lone pieces. Toby Fox has put enough clues into the game so far for us to predict the Knight's identity. A prediction that only requires that we apply what we have been shown thus far, and one that really starts to shed some light on a few other mysteries too. Now, I was planning on bringing up each candidate individually and discussing why or why not they could be the Knight. But after writing this script, I actually stumbled across a video by a YouTuber named Gloop from a few weeks ago that already brought up basically all the points I was going to. This is pretty lucky for me, since now I can skip a whole lot of talking. If you need a good review on the facts that we know so far, you can just pause this video and check it out. I'll put the link in my description. Instead, I'll just lay down a quick and dirty list of Knight facts. The Knight is involved in Des's disappearance. The Knight's appearance in the Dark Worlds is basically a teenage reindeer's edgy, self-insert original character. The Knight acts chaotic and favors flashy, over-the-top shows of force. The Knight can move Undyne all the way across town. The Knight, as a central antagonist, should exhibit significant connection to the themes of the game. So now, when we compare this list to our list of candidates, we run into a major issue. Every suspect seems to have at least 1 or more pieces of evidence that essentially disqualify them from possibly being the Knight. And that is true. The Knight is none of these characters. So who is it then? Which character in Deltarune is the Roaring Knight? Well, in a way, it's none of them, because it's the Knight that is the character. It honestly seems obvious that this is Des's original character, probably created for the games she used to play with the other kids. But since Des is gone, it's impossible for her to still be playing this character. But what if someone changed their character? Someone who now controls what is left of Des, a parallel to how we control Chris. Someone who might be more involved with Des's disappearance than anyone else. Someone like her best friend. Every single requirement for being the Knight fits. Asriel was there when Des disappeared. Of course he would know about Dark Worlds. Of course he would be involved in this conspiracy. Deltarune is a game that uses our relationship with Chris to explore how playing a character is like assuming someone else's identity. And just like how Flowey was a foil for the player in Undertale, we should expect that the Roaring Knight would be a foil for the player in Deltarune. And just like in Undertale, this recurring antagonist will be revealed to have been Asriel all along. In both games, they even share the same motivation, an inability to let go of someone close to them. And, thanks to Undertale, We already know what Azrael is like as a villain. He loves to mock the heroes, to laugh maniacally, to always just be one step ahead. He loves to hit them down to 1 HP and bask in their helplessness. He loves over-the-top flashy attacks that take up the whole screen. He even uses star magic, whatever that means. We know the knight has to be insanely strong in the light world. If Undyne can bench press cars, Asgore's strength probably carries over to Deltarune too. Accordingly, I think we can assume his college-age kid would also be freakishly strong. And, slight tangent here, but I also think Azrael will not really look like this as an adult in Deltarune. Remember that in Undertale, Azrael as a kid was this skinny little shrimp here. Compare that to his silhouette from Deltarune. This kid ain't some hungry little cave dweller. This kid is Asgore's son. He will probably grow up to be built like a goddamn offensive lineman. As a matter of fact, I think that would explain why Susie, who is used to the small, delicate Ralsei, started laughing when she saw Azrael's picture. She thought Chris photoshopped Ralsei to be an absolute unit. But what other information do we have on Azrael? Well, it just so happens that sometimes our ability to learn more about Azrael is cut suspiciously short. Remember how Queen, the library computer, created a room for Azrael based on his search history? A room that, unlike his Lightworld room, could expose information on Azrael besides the stuff he would freely decorate his room with. So how do our interactions with this room go? We can choose to make Chris peek into the room, but they'll refuse to open their eyes. Some people at the time theorized that this was because there might be painful memories in there Chris doesn't want to be reminded of. But Chris does not use this type of malicious compliance to protect their own feelings. They're absolutely willing to ignore their own pain or embarrassment to properly follow our orders. Chris will literally agree to fight for Birdley's affection without notable resistance. They only truly attempt to resist our intentions like this in order to protect someone important to them. Going against our will is not something they can just do whenever it suits them. Yet, they feel the need to prevent us from learning about what Azrael might have been searching the internet for. A very reasonable argument is that keeping your brother's search history from when he was a teenager away from the prying eyes of strangers is just part of being a good sibling. But remember, this room was based off the library computer, and I don't see Azrael as the type who would use public property to unload his Chaos Buster. Also, let's take a look at what we're told if we choose to not check Azrael's room. You have the feeling you wouldn't learn anything. Well, doesn't that sound familiar? This theory doesn't just connect with the pieces we've already put together. It can also help us to start to connect some of the dots in other mysteries as well. Let's take a look at Ralsei. Pretty much everyone agrees right now that Ralsei looks exactly like Chris's old monster Sona. Headband, crayon, drawing, knife. The specific object doesn't really matter too much right now, but what consistently has everyone stumped is the question, why doesn't Ralsei act like he is Chris's old monster Sona? Their personalities just don't line up at all, and Ralsei seems to have absolutely no prior relationship with any of the other Darkners. Remember, most Darkners have been shown to have pre-existing relationships with each other, relationships that exist due to the games the kids played with them back in the day. So, like, are we supposed to believe that Chris didn't use their monster Sona when playing Imagination with the other kids? Never played with their childhood OC in the living room or school, church, not even online? It just doesn't add up. The simple answer is that Ralsei is not Ralsei. The third hero in our party is actually the Prince from the Dark, playing the character Ralsei. It's possible Darkners don't really perceive each other the same way the Lightners or the players perceive them. They seem entirely concerned with what role someone is playing. Tenna doesn't even recognize Spamton now that his role has changed, even though his appearance is the same. Likewise, a Darkner would never make a connection between Chris's old OC and the third member of our party, because they play different roles. This could also explain why Darkners ignore Ralsei so frequently, since the role of the Prince is inherently such a blank slate. In fact, I wonder if the Prince is normally meant to be some sort of narrator of the story, but not a party member. That could explain why the prophecy describes 4 characters who adventure together, but says there are 3 heroes at World's End. The idea that Chris made this self-insert character that was then severed from Chris's identity so it could be used by the Darkner of true darkness is out there, sure, but it does make some sense. It also fits in with this recurring idea of characters being used up. The Darkner that was called Ralsei was sacrificed so that the prince could have a name and face. I think that being an entity that can only exist like this is why Ralsei struggles so much to accept having an identity, and it gives a new light to the line, "It's nice that Ralsei is Ralsei." I don't know if existing like this is a requirement for the prince, or if it just indicates that there's been additional tampering by forces behind the scenes. After all, whatever allows the prince to inhabit Ralsei's character is likely related to whatever is allowing Azrael to inhabit Dess's character. It could easily be the same thing, since if Azrael is the knight, he would have probably been directly involved, if not solely responsible, for the creation of the true fountain, and by extension, the creation of the prince. Oh, but isn't Azrael at college? Well, considering how deeply involved with this stuff Azrael should be, I think it's perfectly reasonable to argue that he did not just go off to college, something that thematically would represent him moving on and no longer being stuck in the past. He's probably been living in the shelter, and considering that the mayor is working with him on this conspiracy, I think he totally would have been able to get into various public buildings like the school, church, library, without anyone seeing him. If the mayor can just provide him with the keys to these buildings, which she probably can, nothing is stopping him from entering them under the cover of darkness when no one else is around. Oh, and before I move on, if Ralsei is the prince, then what happened to the original Ralsei? Well, if my theory is correct, we should expect to find a character who has no name, has no appearance, is connected to the shelter, and has a playful if devious personality. Oh, and they would also have to be acutely aware of the dark secrets Chris has kept locked away within themselves. There are quite a lot of examples of someone playing a character that isn't exactly an accurate representation of who they really are. Now, this is all pretty neat speculation, but why am I so sure that this line of reasoning is correct? And how does Super Smash Bros. Even tie into it? Well, to answer these questions, it's time I revealed my trump card, the final piece of irrefutable evidence that proves this theory is true. An impossibility with no other explanation. Toby Fox passed up an opportunity to reference Melee. The only thing that would cause Toby to make such a sacrifice, the only thing he values more, would be a chance to directly tell the audience some major plot reveal without them realizing. In Chapter 3, we're told Azrael switched his main from Yoshi to a fiery magician girl, the Sword Magician. Not a ninja woman, not a furry space pilot, not a Jigglypuff! This description does not fit any character in Melee, and honestly isn't really a great description of anyone in Smash at all. Pyra isn't a magician, and Robin, yes, she has a fire spell, but that doesn't make her fiery. And Zelda, who is in Melee, could be called a fiery magician girl, but she doesn't have a sword. But you know who does wield a sword, and fire, and magic? The Roaring Knight. Toby Fox straight up tells us Azrael switched characters and is now playing as the Roaring Knight. One last minute addition. You know how the Knight's sword looks like a bat at first? Well, in the 10th anniversary stream, we get to see some cut weapons, including Azrael's bat. Okay, that's the end. Leave a comment saying hi to your future self for when you revisit this video once this gets officially revealed.
Getting huge.